I am really excited to get to talk to everyone today and explore this. I know changing is um, tends to be difficult. I've heard 100 times, change is hard. So I'm excited to explore with you how we can make it easier for folks to change and embrace change. Um, so, if we haven't met before, my name is Carrie Weed, and I get to work with Zane at the Community Engagement Institute. And um, like I said, it's so excited to get to be with you all today. And if I can remember where my button is, I will share my screen. And um, all right, there we go. Bear with me for a minute. That always makes all of my windows change. Redirect. So, all right. Are you seeing my screen?
I see your title slide and the graphic looks awesome.
All right, thank you. All right. So, again, today we're talking about understanding why folks are resisting change or resistant to change and how we can adjust approaches to make it easier. And we'll start that by talking a little bit about the challenge of change. Um, and we'll explore why people are resistant, how you can manage that, and how you can make the transition process smoother for everyone. And throughout our presentation today, I'm going to say a few times at least resistance to change, and I really do invite you, though, to think about that resistance is not people don't want to change. We change regularly, right? So people are not resistant to change necessarily. And we'll talk more about that as we go through today. So, um, first, I want you to think about your own experiences with change. And you are more than welcome to share in the chat or unmute and share out loud. Um, but as we get into thinking about this and think about your own experiences, what's a major change you've experienced when you were experiencing that? And we're talking mostly in the work context. It's okay whether your example that comes to mind is work or not. But was your response to that change positive or negative? So this is a change that might not have been within your control. Um, and so let's start there. What's a major, thinking about a major change you've experienced? You don't have to share specifically what that was, but what was your response to that? What was it, positive, negative? Were you excited? What was that like for you? Right. Starting to see some responses come in, and Deanna was excited. It presented a challenge, and she enjoys that. Um, Oh, Teresa, COVID um, s- um, changed for her that she was working full time um, or work from home full time, which was scary and disconcerting. It didn't feel like there was a plan, right? Yeah, especially with COVID, and that was felt very sudden. So, uh, some uncertainty with what was going to happen. Using Zoom for almost everything was hard at first. Yeah, but it also was gave you some flexibility. Mm. Right. Oh, Philip, great point. Philip said, um, I've generally been positive about changes I've initiated, or more positive about changes I've initiated than when they felt like they were happening to me. Oh, that's spot on for me. Um, Change is a constant in our industry. You have to embrace it. Yeah, but there's always that apprehension. Positive change is exciting, but changing relationships is the toughest. Loss of a coworker, kids moving out of the house. I have a kiddo in college, so I can relate to that one. um, Feeling of having to start all over. Yeah. So lots of mixed emotions and um, reflections. So, thinking back on that example that came to mind for you, what was the end result? Did it succeed? So, thinking if you weren't already about an organizational change, maybe it was everybody on your in your company went to work from home during COVID, or big software changes. Our team switched our university switched to Teams a couple of years ago, and that was it's just technology, but that felt big. So, what was the end result? How did that change go, and what was it at the end, like at the end? Brenda, I like that. Change is like a rocking boat. It soon settles and becomes the new normal. Yeah, you do. You get there. We're adaptable people. My last question here, thinking about those change outcomes and that end result. Um, It was positive. You got to help the organization deepen their understanding of complex challenges. Yeah. Um, so thinking about those transitions, what would have made it just a little bit better for you if it was difficult? What would have made it better when you went to working from home during COVID or whatever your example of a change is? So I'm going to invite you, yeah, someone saying this is rough, acknowledging it, honest and pure communication about the changes and the stages of change. Yeah. So I'm going to invite you to keep those things in mind as we go through today. We'll reflect back to as we go through today, at least a little bit. So I want to share, I don't know if y'all are numbers people, but just a few numbers on the reality of change. And so maybe these are not relatable for you, but it's still the numbers themselves are relatable, whether the scenario is. So in engineering, 30% of re-engineering projects succeed. Only 30%. Um, in the corporate world of mergers, only 23% make back their costs that of that merger. 43% of quality improvement efforts are deemed worth it. Um, and then um, Fortune 500 companies, their executives identified resistance as the primary reason changes fail. It's not a lack of technical skills, it's not resources, um, it's the human side of change that that gets that leads to the failure of change in their minds. And it's also often neglected when folks are approaching change management or implementing a significant change, whether you use a change management framework or not. Um, so that if you've experienced a change that didn't go well or that ultimately didn't happen at all, you're certainly not alone in that experience. So the human side of change, and this is where I'm going to challenge us to reframe how we think about change. Again, hear people say all the time, we used it in the title of this presentation, all right? People resist change. And in reality, people are not resistant to change. Again, we change all the time. People resisting change or being stuck in their ways is not the root of this issue. The root of the issue is that major changes are implemented without fully considering the real human response that this will have on the people who are impacted. And that is valid and real for those people. Their response to changes is completely real and neglected. Um, and they feel like they're the least considered and the most impacted. And if you're in that mindset, are you ready to embrace change? People understand change and that change is going to happen. Whether they want it to happen or not, they know that that's going to happen. Leaders need to be accountable and have to consider what people need in order to be able to embrace change. So I'm going to use this model today. And here again, we're going to see resistance, but um, so this is Rick Moore, and he identified three levels of resistance to change. And he calls those levels. I don't Starting at level one, um, I don't get it. I don't understand why this is happening. Level two, excuse me. I don't like it. That's that emotional response that folks might have to the um, to the change happening, right? Um, and that often is rooted in fear um, from that level one lack of understanding. I don't know what this is going to do to me or to my team. And then there's level three, which gets more complex, and that is the I don't like you. Um, and you in this case, we'll cover this again, but that is not necessarily you as a person implementing the change, but this is I don't trust our leadership team. There's a relationship issue much deeper than the change happening. So, um, if you are familiar with the KLC framework, they often refer to challenges as being technical or adaptive. This is very much a spectrum of technical to adaptive when it comes to addressing these responses to change. Level one, not understanding, that feels like a pretty easy fix. A broken relationship, level three, that is much more complex or adaptive. So, thinking about that, again, level one hesitation or resistance, the lack of understanding, not having feeling you don't have information. Um, Level two being emotional. Level three being trust and relationship issues. I'm going to invite you again to think about that change you experienced um, before and when that change was happening. What level of resistance, assuming there was some, were you operating from? And what factors influenced that? Were you just not understanding it? Didn't feel like there was any information shared? Were you emotional and maybe fearful about it? Or were you distrustful? And we'll take a minute for you to think about that. And again, you're welcome to share. I'd love to hear it, but absolutely not required. Just learning new stuff, so not understanding at first. Thank you for being bold and sharing first. Probably a little distrustful, sure. Emotional. All right. So much work by so many had been put into the effort that it was deeply disappointed that the project was terminated. Ah, you worked really hard on this, and now they are taking it away from you. Um, Number two, life is impermanent and needs to accept. Yeah, and that can be really hard. Trust and relations. Right, right. So again, I'm gonna invite everyone to reframe your thinking um, about resistance to change. Um, and let's instead think of that as um, what people need to embrace change. So, level one, that I don't get it phase or level, really that's I need to understand. I need to understand what's happening, why it's happening. If even if it's happening regardless of my opinion, that I still would want to understand, right? And I need to understand to be ready. At level two of I don't like it, I need safety. If I'm having those emotional responses, I need my leadership to consider that relationship and those psychological safety needs that I have to embrace this change and really process how it's going to impact me and the people that I work with. And then level three, the I don't like you. um, I need trust. I need to trust that you're acting in our best interest and that if you tell me this is required, then it really is. I'm going to do my best to remove that resistance language throughout the rest of our time today, and instead really focus on those as things that people need to be ready to embrace change. And we'll dig in more to how people can approach change and help their teams embrace change when it is happening. So, first, some general change management strategies. Um, so, those five would be transparency, which has already been named, accountability, engagement, building strong relationships, and trust. So, um, in transparency, folks want open, honest communication about the change process. So, as much as you can, um, and I say as much as you can, being if there's a valid reason you cannot share all of the details, that's understandable. But share the rationale behind the decision making. Acknowledge the challenges, and give updates throughout the process. This transparency helps build credibility, and reduces anxiety because you're sharing information. People, again, they feel like they know what's happening, and this is not happening to them, it's happening with them. Accountability. Be clear about your responsibilities as a leader and follow through on the commitments that you make. Establish roles and timelines, success metrics for the change initiative, and be mindful of that. Say what you're going to do and do what you say you're going to do. When leaders demonstrate that kind of accountability, it encourages um, others um, uh, to trust the process, and they know that what they're hearing is actually going to happen. Um, and it also encourages other people to take ownership of their part in the process. People feel engaged and they want to help this succeed. Um, and speaking of engagement, involve stakeholders in your change process. Get their input, listen to their concerns, and when you can, incorporate that feedback. When you can't, acknowledge that. Make sure people are feeling heard. That engagement gives people the psychological safety that they need and helps transform them from feeling like says, again, this is happening to me. It's happening with me. I'm a part of this change that is going to happen inevitably. So it really makes them active in this change journey. Relationships, building those connections with the team that with your team in general, building those connections promotes strong relationships and gives them the support they need and trust they need. Um, so invest time in one-on-one and team conversations, team building activities, creating networks of champions to help with the change, and generally make sure that you have a strong relationship with the folks that are working with you so that they know that they can trust you. Um, I am much more likely to trust and give grace to people who I have a relationship with, right? Because I know them, I know what they're about, and I know that they're acting in my best interest as an employee. And finally, trust, creating that psychological safety through the process, encouraging open dialogue, responding with transparency, doing the things you tell people you're going to do so they know they can trust you to follow through, validating people's concerns, and being consistent between your words and your actions, right? Words are pretty meaningful if they know that you're not going to behave in the way that you say. Um, Trust is the foundation that makes all of the other change strategies effective and sustainable. Um, Now, I want to acknowledge that in an ideal world, you would go into a change as a leader or a leadership team with a well thought out plan and would be engaging with staff and teams throughout the entire process, right? That's what we would all hope would happen. But sometimes change is fast and there isn't time. So um, these are, in some ways, in an ideal world, you would account for and plan for all of these things, but that can't always happen. So whether this is before or during the change, the key here is to address these, make sure all of these things are addressed throughout the change process. Um, and I will give a disclaimer that the exception for me for that would be relationships and trust. You should always be building relationships and trust among your team, right? That shouldn't only happen because something big's happening, because that is not trustful and disingenuous and is going to have the opposite effect. So let's dig into those needs a little bit more and talk about those. So, first, at level one, I need information. Um, that hesitation to embrace change and lack of readiness is because I don't know what's happening or why it's happening, right? So this is the most basic need that people have is information and understanding. Um, so people don't feel prepared, they don't feel like they have information, they disagree with, the information that's being shared or the data serving as a foundation. And there's uncertainty about the impact. So people want information so that they can be prepared for this change and really understand it, right? Um, this is the level where most leaders think that resistance is coming from. That you just don't understand, right? If you only understood fully, you would be fine. Um, and That's not necessarily the case, but this is the most basic need that has to be met. Um, and people who are responding from a, a trust need or an emotional need often might show up as needing more information to understanding because that's the easy thing, right? It's really hard to tell your boss, well, or your boss's boss, I don't trust what you're telling me, right? So instead, I'm going to question it and ask for more information. And as leaders, because we often think that this is where people are coming from. This is also the area that might get the most attention. It's easy. We can share information. We can share lots of information, right? You still don't want this? Let's have another meeting. Let's have another meeting and let me tell you again why this is a good thing. So while people absolutely need information, that is not the only thing that they need when there's a change happening. So um, I'm going to invite you to think just for a minute and please share what this might look like, this need for information. Um, what could that look like, or what are some things you might see or hear from people who are resisting change because they want more information and need and they don't understand it? Anger or frustration. Just for time's sake, I want to make sure we have time to discuss your unique challenges. We'll continue, but please do keep sharing. So, some things you might hear when folks are experiencing this and not getting enough information. This makes me nervous. I've always done it the other way. It doesn't feel right. Change is exhausting. And I don't think I can handle another transition right now, right? There's just I don't think I can do this. Some ways that you might approach this in changing and making sure that that need for information is met. Again, be transparent. Explain why this is necessary. Um, and focus on that before you focus on what or how, right? Make sure people understand that why first. People need to understand the reasoning and necessity um, so that they can then be a part of the what and how, and they can contribute to it or at least implement the what and how. Um, Plan for communication, sharing information. Um, and again, this is not an invitation to hold more town halls and give more and more and more, but share information in a variety of ways that people can understand. So, oftentimes there's complex things happening, and you really need to break it down, especially um, when it's a significant change and people might not be involved in all of the nuances behind the scenes. You need to make this very simple. And also, if they're having an emotional response as well, because these things don't happen in a vacuum, right? I don't understand it, and I'm also emotionally responding at the same time. So the simpler your messages can be and the clearer they can be, the easier it's going to be for folks to understand and then address those emotional responses. Um, so share as much as you can, be clear, share in a variety of ways. I take in information visually. If I have to read something, it's not going to sink in as well as if I hear it or if I have a visual of it. Um, so again, this really is about understanding the why versus the next steps that are happening. Also, a part of understanding is feeling like I can do this. So set your team up to feel like I can do this by giving them the resources they need. That might be skill development, that might be, um, upskilling other things. They might need technology in order to do this. So consider those things as well and make sure that you're offering the right resources for folks to be able to do this. That level two need, again, that often concurrently happening emotional need. Um, I need safety. So this is where folks are feeling uncertainty, that flight or fight might be triggered, and they really want that psychological safety. They want to know what's happening so that they can emotionally respond. There very well could be a change with negative consequences, right? Not all change is we're growing. It could be that things are downsizing or we're getting rid of something. And again, we under people know and understand that, and we're capable of embracing that and adapting to it. But you also have to provide the safety that people need in order to process that and adapt. If I'm in fight or flight mode for the next 6 weeks, I'm not going to be very helpful in this process, right? I'm going to be doing my very best just to get there every day. So, um, again, this is a natural emotional response to hearing new information. Um, Oftentimes because it's new, it is a fight or flight, and it is fear. You have to help people understand the adjustment, um, and provide that psychological safety. So, um, again, I invite you to think about what this might look like. And things you might hear is, nobody asked me. This undermines my authority. I've built this process and you're dismantling it, right? I worked so hard on this. Um, and they don't understand our side of things. They don't have all of the information. Some ways that you can acknowledge um, and plan for that kind of response and help support people through it. Recognize that loss. Again, change, whether overall positive, negative, a gain or a loss, there's going to be loss, that people are experiencing. So recognize that loss. Listen to them. Whether you can change the direction or not is not as relevant as people being heard and feeling like you understand what they're going through. Um, and um, build that, listening and acknowledging that human reaction and response that people are having helps build trust, and it respects the experience of the people that are being impacted. Highlight the benefits. If I'm in fight or flight, I'm not thinking about what positive things might happen, right? Because I'm down here in the, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. I'm not thinking about what's opening up. So make sure that you can offer that. And again, you there's a balance here of recognizing and acknowledging their loss and making them feel heard. So this does require a delicate approach, but also when you're sharing, what's happening in your plans, highlight what's good in this for folks. Give concrete examples of how change will improve their work, um, solve problems, or create new possibilities. Um, and check in frequently. Check in regularly throughout the process. This is certainly not a one and done. I might have a conversation with you today where I come away feeling like, yeah, this is going to be okay. And then, 2 weeks from now, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a nightmare, right? Our emotions are not linear. So continue to check in through and communicate throughout the change process. Um, and also, there are change management models that focus on and emphasize the emotional um, tracks that people experience through change. So that really helps give you, as a leader, a framework throughout the journey of change and what people are experiencing so that you can support them. Because that might not come naturally for you, and that's okay. Um, Remember that this resistance is coming from a place of need for safety and security. Um, Address those needs, patience, giving people time to process what they're going through, and be open with that. And as a leader, that requires a really good amount of emotional intelligence, right? Because you're taking on negative emotions from other people, possibly, and that can feel very personal and targeted. So um, you have to be prepared to take that on, and let people process how they need to before they can fully engage with the practical side of implementing the change. And then the last here, and the most significant and also most overlooked, is that I need trust. And that's going back to that relational side of things. And um, when people don't trust you, that's not necessarily you personally. That could be the system, that could be the leadership, the company. Again, it's not necessarily you on a personal level, but at the same time, needing trust is personal. Um, People are not responding because the change is happening. They're responding because there's broken relationships and broken trust. Um, the person leading the change or the group leading the change have a credibility issue. They are not trusted, or they don't have credibility with the team, um, to for the team to trust their motives behind the change. Um, and so, what are some ways that this might show up for folks? This one's harder for folks to, as leaders, as humans, it's harder to address and recognize because it's that relational foundation. And you cannot genuinely um, approach this if you are rushing through the process. Um, Asking other people to intercede and not discussing directly. Yeah. Feeling like the change is personal, they feel attacked. Yeah. Actively digging into resistance, right? They're fighting tooth and nail. Yeah. Masking it as troubleshooting. Yeah. What if they start with letting you know what the goal is, and help provide the steps needed to meet the goal? Of course, willing to explain the why. If they're willing to explain the why, that would be great. Yeah. And that end goal oftentimes is the why, or it can be the why. Some older style of management don't see the need to explain the why, but they just do it, right? That authoritarian approach to change. Why do it? Because I said so, right? That's all you need to know. And that, in my mind, is likely why we now are in this narrative that people resist change, is because they're not a part of it, right? You told me this is going to happen, and I'm supposed to, soldier on and do it, and that's not realistic, and that's not human. Making accusations, sure, right? I don't, again, that skepticism, um, about your motives. Right? Some things you might hear. Um, what is this really about? Um, it, why are we really doing this? Um, I noticed the people who decided this aren't going to be affected by it, right? It's not going to it's not going to do anything to them. This is a power grab. So there are those accusations. Who's going to benefit the most? kind of there's something bigger happening here that we don't know. We're not getting all the information. Shutting down, right? If I don't trust you, I'm not telling you where I'm coming from here, right? I'm not going to tell you that I'm feeling scared. I'm not admitting that if I don't trust you, right? Very good. So um, stop trying to give all sides. Yeah. Great. So strategies for level 3. So ways that you can help meet that trust need. Um, Building authentic relationships, right? Again, I'm more likely to trust you if I know you. Um, Focus on genuine interactions rather than just being transactional. Um, and take time to understand individual concerns and perspectives. And demonstrate that you value their input beyond the context of change. Um, if you're only talking to me during a change, that's transactional, right? Um, um, even if it is even if it is uh, something that seems like building relationships, if it's only happening when things are changing, that lacks that authenticity that people need. Um, Demonstrate trustworthiness. Again, be reliable and be consistent in your actions. Follow through on the commitments that you make, and be transparent when you can and cannot deliver. So we're all human, and if you can't do what you thought you could, that's okay. But you've got to be accountable and acknowledge that. Um, Create that track record of being dependable so that your team knows that they can rely on you. And they've got that past experience creeping in the back of their mind when there are doubts. Because again, going back to that emotional state and emotional response, those even if I do fully trust you, I'm still likely to have some doubts. And so, but if I know from our history together that you are dependable, then those doubts are going to be easier to squash. Be consistent. Again, make sure that your words and actions align, so that you are credible among your team. Ensure that your messaging is steady across audiences and contexts. So you might tell different groups of people different levels of detail, but the overall message has got to be consistent. Um, Inconsistencies between what you say and what you do is noticed. People take note of that, and that erodes trust very quickly. And model the behavior you're wanting others to adopt. Um, Again, be transparent and be honest, even about the hard things that are happening. Acknowledge those challenges rather than ignoring or downplaying them. Um, Share your successes and your setbacks throughout the process. Things are things rarely go according to plan, right? So if you acknowledge those things and how you're shifting, be forthcoming about things that you're not sure about. Um, it's that human experience that you don't necessarily have it all figured out. There are going to be setbacks. So the important thing is to recognize and acknowledge them. Don't pretend that you know exactly what's going to happen, and that everything is absolutely going to work out great. Um, People trust leaders who are vulnerable to them and feel authentic. And a part of that authenticity is acknowledging that things are uncertain or that things didn't go as planned, and so you've got to adjust. Um, and then acknowledge the past. And for me, this feels the most important, especially when there is a lack of trust. You've got to acknowledge the reason behind that, even if it wasn't yours. right? Even if you're new in the position, you still need to recognize and acknowledge what folks have experienced in the past. This addressing these missteps directly helps people know that you've not forgotten that history. It validates where they're at. Um, Explain how this is different from what's happened in the past, right? You know, we've heard that, oh, we've done this before and it didn't work last time. So make sure people know what's different now that that you feel makes this is going to make this successful. What changes have you made, or what safeguards are there to prevent repeating those mistakes? Um, let folks know that you've learned from what happened as well. Mm. I'm going to pause there and invite and questions that you might have right now about what we've talked about so far. Mm. Um, a few minutes ago, Deanna shared in the chat, demonstrating some level of risk is crucial. You're asking others to risk, and you should be doing the same. Absolutely. So keep thinking about questions you might have. You might be typing. Um, and I want to go back to and recognize that, um, again, people are not going through change and experiencing change needs in a silo. So throughout the process, you're going to feel like you're backsliding, right? Um, because there are ups and downs, um, and people don't have one level of need. I don't only need you to support my emotional side. I also need information. I also need trust. Um, you and they may not know what level of need their response is coming from, because again, you know, it that trust need could show up as information. I want to understand where this is coming from, because that's the easier response to give. So it's important that throughout the process of a change, whether it's a long-term project that you've had a lot of time to plan for, and you can create that communication plan and get feedback and make adjustments, or if it's a rushed sort of thing that you've got to do immediately, so there's not as much communication as you'd like. Um, you still have to acknowledge and address all three of these simultaneously and repeatedly. Provide clear information, create emotional safety, and build those trusting relationships, which is an ongoing process for sure. I'm going to pause there here again for your questions and your thoughts. What are your specific change management challenges? Seeing when change happens more from the bottom up or peer to peer, how do you address resistance? And I I feel like you can address it in the same way. Um, Again, whether wherever change is coming from, your our responses are often going to be the same. Um, Peer to peer, you are likely to have more understanding and more relationship in a lot of cases. So that trust might be um, an easier process, but still help making sure that folks fully understand what's happening and feel supported in responding. Keep folks on topic instead of making it personal. Yeah, that's a good question, Carol. That folks, instead of talking about the change itself and wanting to address that and those needs, making it personal. And so it might feel like they're attacking you or leadership on a personal level. Um, and that um, often is coming from that trust place, right? Because that is personal of if I'm making it more personal than about the change itself, then that's likely a broken relationship, and that those relationships need a lot of attention, I think. Um, Leading when you haven't had time to build relationships. Teresa's new and leading an organization and has to go. They're going through a large change. Advice for leading when you haven't had time to build relationships. Um, I feel like this is actually a really good opportunity as a leader to build relationships. Folks know you're new, so if you're getting input from them and sharing back and forth regularly, then you're demonstrating who you are as a leader, and it's going to be hard and maybe a little bit harder because they don't know you. But this is a really good opportunity for you to build relationships through change. And I would really focus on that interaction and engagement so that folks feel um, understood and like they're getting to know you. Uh, and I also want to recognize that that can feel more risky because you don't have that credibility with them already. So um, I think also don't make everything about the change happening. So have interactions with folks outside of talking about this big change that's happening. There are certainly other things that folks are experiencing or that you want to get to know aside from that change. What else is on your mind? Mm. And I am certain that other folks have ideas and responses to questions happening as well. So please share those and disagree with me or share your thoughts as well. We've got just a couple of minutes before we'll have to sign off for today. So thinking about those questions that we've heard, peer-to-peer change or bottom-up change, where folks are included in a part of the process. Then how do you address resistance? Um, Keeping folks on the topic of the change and redirecting their frustrations to that versus personal resistance or conflict. And leading when you're new to an organization, leading them through a significant change when you don't have those relationships. What are some um, things that you could think of folks could do to help manage that? Backtracking just a little bit to the question about peer-to-peer or bottom-up changes, I think you can also use that to your advantage in some ways. It can be reassuring to folks that even if they weren't directly involved, um, that the people who are kind of the boots on the ground, really doing the work, were a part of it and had some input. Listening with an open mind is crucial. Absolutely. Those that trust and relationship is key to success in a lot of ways. Um, and especially when it comes to change. Um, if discussions about the change tend to get off topic, are there any trends where the conversation deviates? Right. When is that happening? Um, there might be something specific that could be addressed to alleviate the off-topic conversations. And I know people have different levels of comfort with being direct, but it is entirely fair um, to acknowledge if somebody is getting personal in their response um, versus something about the change itself. So if it's starting to get truly personal versus feeling personal um, as uh, as a leader, when people are not loving your ideas, that can feel personal. But if it really is getting to the area into an area of being personal, then it is completely valid and fair to call that out and and redirect. Right. Still some responses coming in. Being a new leader and leading a significant change. Some advice. It is tough without relationships. Focus on listening. Grab a coffee, hop on quick chats, and just ask folks what's working and what's not. People support change when they feel heard. Building trust early goes a long way. And some great encouragement that you've got this. Yeah, it's hard to listen to a lot of negative feedback when it comes to change. So try engaging them in some solutions also. So um, yes, we can talk about what's wrong, but let's brainstorm what's right and how we can address it. All right. Thank you all so much for listening and engaging today. And I appreciate the advice for giving each other.